From political shifts and economic updates to viral social moments and trending pop culture, we've got you covered with all the information you need to stay ahead. Whether it's breaking news, the latest from social media, or a deep dive into what's really happening on the global stage, you'll find it right here, delivered fast, clear, and to the point.
You know, when we get a stack of news like this with headlines screaming about a Category 5 hurricane heading straight for Florida's west coast, well, let's just say it grabs our attention. We're diving straight into the eye of Hurricane Milton with you today.
And it's not just the wind speed that has everyone on edge.
Yeah.
What we're seeing with Milton is a convergence of factors that could make this even more serious than recent hurricanes like Ian or Charlie.
Right, those were no walks in the park either. So we're talking about a potentially life-altering event for those in Milton's path. We've got reports from Daytona Beach, think tense energy, the surf already churning, and that mandatory evacuation order ringing in everyone's ears. What's the feeling on the ground over there?
It's that unsettling mix of preparation and apprehension. Even though Milton is expected to weaken by the time it reaches Daytona, likely a Category 1, officials aren't taking any chances. And they shouldn't.
You're listening to those warnings, right? They're saying this storm surge could be unlike anything in recorded history, especially for the Tampa Bay area. That's got to be a sobering thought for anyone living on the coast.
Absolutely. And what's particularly concerning is that this part of Florida is still reeling from Hurricane Helene just a few weeks ago. A lot of debris is still scattered around. And when you combine that with hurricane force winds, well, let's just say it creates a whole new level of danger. We're talking flying projectiles with the potential for significant damage.
You know, one report that really struck me was this account of driving across Florida yesterday. Picture this, 6 lanes of highway, usually a river of cars, totally deserted, empty. Gas stations that are even open have lines snaking around the block, people frantically trying to fuel up. It paints a vivid picture of the scramble to prepare. Have you ever experienced anything like that? It's that eerie calm before the storm, isn't it? You can almost feel the tension in the air, even from hundreds of miles away. And you're right, it's not just about wind speed with Hurricane Milton. You mentioned earlier that several factors make the storm particularly dangerous. Can you break that down for us? What has experts so worried?
It's like a perfect storm of worst-case scenarios coming together. First, you have the storm surge, which, as we discussed, could be unlike anything Tampa Bay's ever seen. Imagine walls of water surging inland, exceeding historical records by a significant margin.
That's not just water, that's a wall of destruction.
Exactly. And then add the debris from Hurricane Helene, turning into dangerous projectiles in those high winds. We're talking about a recipe for widespread damage, even in areas that might normally consider themselves relatively safe from a Category 1 hurricane.
So even if Milton weakens as it approaches the coast, the danger is far from over.
Precisely. And then there's the speed at which Milton intensified. It went from a tropical storm to a Category 5 monster in almost record time. That rapid intensification caught a lot of people off guard. They had less time to prepare, which adds another layer of complexity to this situation.
You're right, it really ups the ante for everyone involved. It makes those stark warnings from officials even more impactful. We're hearing things like, this is not survivable if people don't heed the evacuation orders. Those are strong words.
And rightfully so. The mayor of Tampa was very blunt about it, saying that those who choose to stay in evacuation zones are putting their lives at risk. Emergency services might not be able to reach them. The message is clear. This is not the time to be complacent.
It's a life or death situation for many. Amidst all the data and projections, we can't forget the human impact of this unfolding disaster. One thing we keep seeing is the incredible resilience of the people in the storm's path. For example, in Sarasota, despite the looming threat, people are coming together, helping neighbors clear debris, offering whatever support they can. It really is something, isn't it? That even with this massive storm looming, there's still this urge to come together and help each other out.
Yeah, it speaks to that human spirit.
Yeah.
You know? That sense of community that always seems to surface when things get rough. We saw it with Ian, with Charlie, and we're seeing it again now with Milton.
It really makes you think about that story about that emergency management chief in Sarasota.
Yeah.
You know, the one who evacuated her family to the East Coast.
Right.
She said there's no way she could focus on her job, you know, keeping everyone safe if she didn't know her own family was out of harm's way.
Absolutely puts things into perspective, doesn't it? Behind the scenes, the people in charge are dealing with the same anxieties and stress we all feel when something like this is happening.
It sure does. And speaking of different sides to this whole thing, let's talk about the political side of this, because anytime you have a hurricane this big, The conversation always seems to turn to things like disaster preparedness and how relief efforts are going to be handled.
Yeah, it's like natural disasters shine a spotlight on those kinds of issues, don't they? Suddenly, everyone's talking about resource allocation and whose responsibility it is to make sure people are taken care of. We're already seeing it happen with Milton.
Exactly. We're seeing some pretty strong opinions from elected officials in the areas that are going to be hit hardest. Congressman Byron Donalds, whose district is right in the path of the storm, he's been particularly vocal about all of this.
Yeah, he's really taking a two-pronged approach. On the one hand, he's urging everyone to evacuate, emphasizing how serious this storm surge could be. He's making it very clear that if people wait until the last minute, rescue efforts might not be possible.
You can hear the agency in his voice, for sure. But he's also looking past this immediate crisis, isn't he? He's raising concerns about whether there will be enough resources to help these communities rebuild, especially with these intense storms becoming more and more frequent.
Absolutely, and that's something that often gets overlooked in these situations. The recovery process takes a long time, and it's expensive. He's basically saying we need to be having serious discussions about how we prepare for these events and how we allocate resources now, not after the fact. He said that he believes FEMA has enough to handle the initial response to Hurricane Milton, but he's concerned about what happens after that, especially as these extreme weather events become more common.
It's a conversation that goes way beyond just Hurricane Milton. We're living in a world now where extreme weather is becoming the norm. It really makes you wonder how we adapt to that both individually and as a society.
Exactly. How do we make disaster preparedness more of a priority and make sure that our communities can weather these storms as they become more frequent and more severe? Something we all need to be thinking about and talking about.
It's a conversation that hits close to home for a lot of people, and the images and the stories coming out of Florida right now really drive that home. As we wrap up this deep dive on Hurricane Milton, we want to leave you with this. Take the warnings seriously, stay informed, and if you know anyone in the areas that are going to be affected, check in on them. And maybe let this be a wake-up call for all of us to think about how we can be more prepared for whatever comes next.
Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to smash that like button. It helps the channel. And if you're new here or just haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our future content. Oh, and don't forget to ring the bell icon so you'll be the first to know when we drop something new. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming up.